My name is Jens Mueller. On behalf of the Waikato Management School, I welcome you to the Strategy course. This is a module designed specifically for working managers to walk you through how strategy as a topic is used in managerial decision making and how it can be helpful for leaders. In fact, why it is an integral and absolutely essential part for leaders to develop their abilities to make organizations transform from where they are now to where they could be in the future. This works extremely well, both for-profit, not-for-profit, council-owned, government-like organizations, and this is something that, in general, is a hallmark of good leaders. Now, I came to this game a long time ago. I started out working in a number of organizations, from very small firms that I founded and co-founded to running billion-dollar global organizations, and then today in New Zealand pretty much work with government on improvement of SOEs. I sit on the board of Pharmac, and I advise the Minister of Health on the composition of health boards that we have in the country, and I work with a number of corporate clients worldwide. You're more than welcome to peruse my webpage, and I will blend that in for you so you can look that up. Now, the approach we'll be taking is that strategy has to be something that can affect a change in an organization, in the way you operate, pretty much right away. So we're not going to make this very theoretical, we're not going to make this very academic. However, we will clearly go back to the established ways that literature has told us, that researchers have told us for years, how strategy can be formed, how strategy can be sold. I teach the same kind of MBA program in Chicago, in Adelaide, in Singapore, in Russia, in Germany. So this is something that is a very established basic module. It is absolutely essential for senior managements and leaders to understand that. So what we will do is we will find the most engaging way, Facebook in this case, to interact, so this does not become stale. So let me walk you through what exactly we're going to do during this course. This is a course that combines two key elements of managerial performance and leadership. One is marketing, which I don't do, and one is strategy, which I do. So I will focus on the strategy portion here, and then my colleague who runs the marketing portion will talk about his assessments or hers and what will be done. What we're after in this course is to have practically relevant assessments. That means that what we will do is not just for this course, but hopefully something that you can apply as you go through and do some of these strategic exercises, looking at your company and trying to see where you can improve in real life. We'll focus on drivers of change. Drivers of change are the elements that come into play when an organization is subject to an influence, internally generated or externally produced, that it has to react to, that it wants to react to, that it wants to take advantage of in order to progress and move along. So we'll talk about to what an extent an organization needs to be ready in order to effect that change. I'll leave it up to you to decide whether you are happy, excited, motivated by the idea of change, or whether it scares you, whether it creates an uncertainty, whether it is something that you could rather do without. And we'll talk about the various emotions that play into this so that we can understand how team members, how staff will react to a proposal of changing something in the firm, changing the way we look at ourselves, changing where we want to go, and to some extent changing how we act in a day-to-day life capacity. We will talk about stakeholders. We will connect an organization as it understands itself to its surrounding parties that have an interest in the organization's performance. We'll go through and look at what kind of stakeholders are there, how do we react to those, and how do we make sure that in our decision making we take stakeholders' interests seriously and we make sure that what we decide in an organization to do is somewhat anchored in our belief that stakeholders are important. We may not always like what the stakeholders wish us to do or the demands that they place on us, but it makes sense to at least consider what there is as an interest from stakeholders so that when we make decisions, we have at least ventilated how some of our actions will play with stakeholders, what opposition, what support, what kind of environment we can expect in which to operate. We will talk about a fairly extensive topic that means, for many organizations, a fundamental change in how they operate, and that is the formation of alliances, of partnerships, of joint ventures. I think you will agree that an organization that believes it alone can climb any mountain and has enough resources to cover the whole world and is fully competent to do everything it can possibly do in the future, doesn't really exist. Many of the organizations have fairly focused, fairly competent areas in which they perform well, but those areas are not world-spanning, and they're usually not even country-spanning, and in many cases they're not even spanning more than one area of competence. So a joint venture, working together, co-opetition, alliance, partnerships, mergers, are all key strategic elements of a major frame-breaking ability for the organization. We'll talk about diversification. We'll talk about how organizations decide what they're good at, what they focus on, and in many cases, regrettably, how unfocused they sometimes are. That means that we're going to look at the strategy of resourcing in a key area where an organization is competent at the cost of not resourcing, outsourcing parts of the organization that cannot be handled with the same level of competence. What we're really after here is to make clear that an organization can only be strategically successful if it knows where it's good, if it knows where it makes a difference, if it knows where it should and should not play. We'll talk about failures, strategic failures, and if you buy into the notion that strategy is based on a level of uncertainty, not quite knowing whether and how we will succeed with what we're setting out to do, then it's pretty clear that failures will occur with some sort of regularity. In fact, failures in strategic planning and strategy decision-making is usually the cost of doing business. It happens frequently. The question is how we recover, how quickly we can make an organization perform better and differently, judging on what it has done in the past, moving along, recognizing things that worked well, recognizing things that didn't go well, and then learn from that and move on. For the strategic portion, we have really two sets of assessment. We have a set of tests, and those are going to be small, short cases that come from local newspapers, from the Herald, from the Sydney Morning Herald, from various areas of business correspondence, journalism, where we have short descriptions of events in the life of a company, somewhere in New Zealand, somewhere overseas, that include strategy. Rather than having you write a case study in isolation at home, we will do what you would do at work. We will give you a question, and we will then ask that you answer that right away. See, when a manager asks you something at work, you can't just say, let me get back to you, rush into your office, type up 1,500 words, do a lot of citation checking, type it all up, make it look good, and then hand it back. You're expected to have an answer. So the way we're going to test what you know, not what you read, is that we're going to put these cases on Facebook. So we will have a secret group that only you as class members are allowed to be in. That group is a group in which we will have correspondence going back and forth between me and you each other. We'll answer questions, we'll talk about whatever issues there might be. What that does is it creates a combustive element of discussion that is very intense, that goes very fast, that is usually quite easy to do in terms of the topics, but it tests you on how you can participate in a discussion about strategy. At the end of the course, what we would like to see from you is that you are able to take the academic knowledge we talked about, some of the practical relevance, and to put that into a review where you become a strategy consultant, effectively looking at an organization from the outside as a consultant in strategy. Now, strategy consultants work on the basis that they look at an organization how it currently is. They apply the analysis methods that you would have learned in class, SWOT, PEST, Porter's 5, all of these things that strategists do, and they would then consider whether that organization is in fact a good strategic organization or whether it is just a operational, very basic organization. The logic is that organizations that are operationally minded and not strategically driven will ultimately fail long-term compared to those that are. So in the first assessment that we'll do on Friday afternoon, you will have a chance to present about 20-25 minutes. Very good, very engaging, very high-level presentation, something that you could do for a board, for a council, for a group of CEOs. And you will look at that client company. You will conclude based on your analysis and your background analysis of that firm, that entity, to what extent they are strategically operating and successful. If you find they are not, then I expect that you have some recommendations of what they should do to get there. That, of course, draws heavily on the class material, so this is something that we will develop jointly during class. There will be some time set aside during class where you have some time to work on this, but ultimately this is something that is a lot of break time, early mornings and late nights. This is not for the faint-hearted here. Second part of that process, that assessment, is the report. That is due a week, 2 weeks afterwards, so you have time to take on board the comments from the presentation that you get from the group and me, to then come up with additional input, additional material to make that report come out right. That would be a report that then details in a much greater level of source information, of detail, of comprehensive background information, factoids, what you concluded and why, and that should be to a standard of being given to a board, to a council chair, to a mayor, to somebody who is in charge of an organization, and to then take on board your recommendations. To make this a little bit more relevant, one of the things we will do is look at cases, short cases that come from various parts of the world where strategy and leadership are key issues. You probably have had some case studies before, cases that were 13, 14, 15 pages long and quite monster humdingers that nobody really cares about. And so what we will do is use a number of cases that are quite short, 4, 5, 6 pages. Easily written cases written by practitioners who have experienced those case activities firsthand and who are able to shed light into some of the more complex thinking of leaders. Now what I will do is, in order to make this easier for you, I will use 2 different case books which I have put together, which will give you a set of good cases. And since those are case books in which I have a financial interest, it is prudent to give them away to you free. So I will send you a link that will come out by email or by Facebook, I guess, over the next couple of days, that will give you the download instructions for these books. There are really 2 different books. One is a case book that talks about change and leading change. To some extent, it gives you the chance of identifying change and to what extent change is important and relatively easy to operate. The second book is very similar. It is a similar type book, and what it goes after is the definition of what elements of change readiness, what kind of leadership qualities do we need. Both books together have, about 500 pages worth of cases, lots of different cases, and we'll pick some that are of interest. We'll pick some shorter ones. We'll let you go through them in groups so that you have a chance to look at some of the mysterious ways of how organizations work and possibly decode, unearth, why leaders make decisions that are anchored in long-term strategy and therefore lead an organization forward. And it will probably make you quite engaged in the topic. We will then also have a lot of opportunity during the class to interact so that I can see where you're coming from, where some of your unique organizational needs can be addressed with this course. So in summary, we will set the scene for why strategically operating is an advantage for organizations. We'll go through the tools of what you will need to be effective. We will look at what leaders do to be good at their job. We will then go through a practical application so that you can walk away knowing you have done a complete strategic plan. That is important so that you have that down pat and you can apply that later on. And we will make sure that the assessments are assessments that work really well in terms of practical content. Any questions that you have before the course starts, anything important that you need to discuss, Facebook contact is the fastest for me, otherwise email, otherwise text, and the information will be on the screen here below. I look forward to meeting you. The whole work that I do is focused on adult learning, so I only deal with working managers. So this is not going to be a typical classroom scenario. This will be a setup that is based on management group discussions. This will be at the level of a board table. This will be quite engaging. But in return for that level of practical relevance, what I want from you is a lot of participation. So this is not a course where you will be rained upon with information that you can then soak up and at some point regurgitate. This requires that you engage, that you participate, and that you have a good time. On that happy note, I will see you shortly. Bye-bye.